Oh, we're live. Okay. So thank you everybody for your patience. I think, the wind has maybe had a metaphorical input on some of this, but thank you all for your patience as we get through some of those technical difficulties. And so I know we've lost a little bit of time, but as one of our members said, Patrisse needs no introduction. So we'll go ahead and jump back into what we were talking about in terms of how you became an activist. At what point in your life did you feel that you became an activist and organizer?
Yeah, and so sorry everybody for the technical difficulties.
Mhm.
Virtual. This is what happens on
Right.
virtual sometimes, but we're
Yeah.
back and live, and I'm very impressed with the Wayne State team who was able to get us back online so quickly.
Well,
So
thank
just
you for your patience, and
of
thank you again for being here. So yeah.
course. Um, so yeah, I think this question, and I really appreciate you asking this question, because especially for the world of activism and organizing, for a very long time, that world was a world that was not trendy, was very unknown. People didn't really know what community organizers or activists did, and I'll argue that mostly people still don't know.
Mhm.
But what we've seen over the last several years is a real emergence of a movement,
Yeah.
and many movements, the feminist movement, the Black liberation movement, the immigrant rights movement, really led by undocumented communities across race. And the work of in my life of community activism, community organizing, and I would add to that, being a community artist, because I was an artist before I was an organizer, really did start as a young person. I wouldn't have called myself an activist and organizer then, but I was truly being an activist and organizer. I think one of the first things that I did as a young activist, I read a book as a young person about the civil rights movement, and then I remember going to my fourth grade teacher and saying, I want to teach this book to our classroom. I want to have like a book. I want to do my book report, and I want to teach the rest of the classroom. I thought it was so important that I was reading about this movement, the civil rights movement. And I was always really interested in talking to my peers about what I was learning. I was
Mhm.
never one that was selfish about my knowledge. And
Mhm.
that was just something that I did at a very young age. I see that also in my child. He's very
Mhm.
adamant about sharing what he's learning. That's what
Yeah.
organizers do. We share what we're learning, and then we ask people to join us in trying to change systems and change the world. So that happened at a young age. And from there, as I started to become more politicized, as I started to read more, and as I started to learn more about, the work people were doing at the local level in Los Angeles, in my city,
Yeah.
I joined organizations, and I started to
Mhm.
volunteer for organizations, and I started to do work at the local level to really support organizations. And
Mhm.
from that work, I then started my own organization, the first organization I ever started, called Dignity and Power Now.
Mhm.
Didn't know how to build an institution, and I didn't know how to build a nonprofit, but I leaned on a lot of nonprofit leaders here in LA. I remember meeting with executive directors and asking a bunch of questions and asking what I should be thinking about, and kind of like building up my own training
Yeah.
for the work of being an ED. And that is almost like, a decade of work before Black Lives Matter was to start. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that so much of my work has happened here at the local level as a community organizer and community activist and community artist,
Mhm.
because I believe that the local work is actually the work that's going to change not just the community around us, but also have impact on the states we're living in and the country
Right.
we're in.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate you talking about how there's that point where you don't realize that you're doing the work, right? You feel like you can't attach that name, but that is activism in those younger years. I like that. So I do want to touch on just a little bit because you talked about how that was decade of work before you emerged into some of the spaces that we know you for now. But this work can be consuming and challenging, but rewarding. And in your book, you talk a little bit about how you don't like the term self-care, but because of how it's been co-opted and watered down. But can you talk about how you take care of yourself, or how you learned to take care of yourself in doing that work and avoiding burnout as an activist and organizer?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, this is a very hard one. I'm gonna be really honest. And I really try to when I answer these questions, I try to be really honest and heartfelt and transparent because I don't want to give you a canned response. But
Mhm.
the very nature of the work that many of us are doing does almost inevitably lead to burnout
Mhm.
because it is often takes all of us. It's often a small group of us that are doing a lot of the labor.
Yeah.
So I think part of what I've tried to do in this work is take breaks.
Mhm.
And what do I mean by that? I don't always mean taking the break that is can you all okay, great.
Yes.
I think Stephanie's screen is frozen for me, but I'll
I
continue
I can
with my
see
question.
you. I can see you. So,
Right, you just unfroze.
okay.
Um, taking a break from the hard kind of labor that goes into this work, and
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I, like, take months off,
Mhm.
but it does mean that, I hold my weekends very sacred now. I
Yeah.
used to be the person that works 7 days a week. I'll take phone calls on the weekends, I'll do an event on the weekends. I have a child now,
Yeah.
and I really started to realize, like, ooh, some of these habits that I have are not just harmful for me, but also harmful for the people around me. I don't wanna be the community organizer, and we've kinda seen some of these stories, right? The children of community organizers who they're like, "My parent wasn't there. They were there for the people and the movement, but
Mhm.
not for me." And I really value my family time, my community time, and that really nourishes me. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of nature. I live in
Mhm.
California, so I go to the beach a lot and just
Nice.
sometimes just park at the beach and exactly, and just hold space there. Y'all got a beautiful is it the river?
We got a river, yeah. We
Yeah,
got
you got
some
a beautiful
lakes
river.
and yeah.
Been on I've been on that river. Um And, and I do center, in my work, both my personal practice, but also across orgs, I do center healing justice.
Mhm.
I do center health and wellness, not just for me, but my staff and the people who work around me,
Yeah.
because I want people to live long, healthy lives. We deserve that. And so
Yeah.
it's not, I think everyone who's listening, building your own personal practice of health and wellness is critical,
Mhm.
necessary, and also for the institutions that we're in, for the work that we're doing, we should also be thinking about how those spaces can also model health and wellness.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that also serves as an example. The ways in which you care for yourself can help empower those around you to take on some of those habits, to be better stewards to themselves. Um, okay, so you've talked a little bit about community and how that's something that you center and is important to you. So I want to shift to where we can kind of talk about community together. And we got some lakes. We talked about Michigan a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about activism in Detroit, or what you know about activism happening here? And what do you see as some of the strengths and opportunities here?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Detroit, especially when I was younger. I have a lot of dear friends from Detroit or moved to Detroit and lived there and doing amazing work there. And obviously was a big fan of Grace Lee Boggs
Mhm.
before she passed away, and I really followed a lot of the work that she did,
Yeah.
you know, as a longtime Detroiter. And y the one thing that I feel so grateful for about the work in Detroit and the work that I was able to witness in Detroit, when, in some ways you all were on the front lines of kind of like, what does it look like to take back a city that has been divested from, a
Mhm.
city that has been largely looked over, a city
Mhm.
that was a booming city at one point with a booming industry, and then almost overnight, um, that industry being pulled out. What does
Mhm.
it look like to be in a city, a Black city,
Yeah.
the home of Motown, and so many really powerful creatives. And then like what happens. I remember my first time in Detroit being in downtown,
Yeah.
watching all the sort of boarded up windows, and asking questions, or going in communities and seeing how, there'd be blocks and blocks of empty houses. Um, and some would, could have said, well, this community is really, you know, um, uh, abysmal, and there could have been a lot of kind of detrimental terminology for the community. But
Mhm.
so many of the community organizers and activists and artists, y'all have amazing artists in Detroit,
Mhm.
really led with like, how do we take back our city? How do we take back the block? And some of the early projects I remember were community gardening projects.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, being one of the largest community gardens, having one of the largest community gardens in the country,
Mhm.
that really shaped how I understood the work I did here in Los Angeles. And having those early conversations, going to the AMC every year, for several years, and meeting up with organizers and activists and artists from around the country and the world to
Yeah.
discuss how do we build a new world. Detroit is the front line of like how we build a new world. It is. Y'all are the front line of like how a community and a country. It's sort of, in some ways, I see Detroit as like a cautionary tale
Mhm.
of where the country uh, will end up going under, racial capitalism. And so I
Mhm.
think it's really important that we have that conversation about how Detroit becomes an important marker for what's possible
Mhm.
when your community has been divested from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's interesting to see how we continue to evolve. And, I like to witness the pushback against gentrification and how so many blueprints of what happens when a city goes through evolutions and how phases might move through phases of, or how redevelopment might move through phases of gentrification. So, um, okay. So, we're obviously at Wayne State in the heart of Detroit, one of those communities that is focused on academia. And so we got a question talking about concerns that academic activism can erode the public trust in the objectivity of academic research. As an academic, how do you bring activism to your students? How do you get them involved?
It's a really good question. I'm just rereading it. There could be concerns that academic activism can erode the public trust and the objectivity of academic
Yes,
research.
I don't know what faculty member submitted that, but we're gonna work hard to answer it.
Uh, so, it's so funny because I just talked about something similar to this in a radio interview that I did yesterday, a pre-record that aired today on a good friend of mine, Cat
Oh,
Brooks' show, um, up in the Bay Area. And I'll say this, I feel like academia is one place that helps us build our scholarship. I don't identify necessarily as an academic,
okay.
but I do identify as a scholar.
Mhm.
And I feel like academia helps provide a container for scholarship.
Mm,
And the way that I really think about that work for my students in particular, first of all, the work that what I teach is at the intersection of art and activism.
mm,
I believe that the work that we do should be work that's helping transform and change the places that we're a part of.
yeah.
All the work that I'm doing is truly about changing the material conditions for communities most impacted by state violence. And when I say state violence, I don't just mean policing and incarceration.
Mhm.
I believe that not giving people access to healthy food or healthcare is state violence.
Mhm.
And so, when I'm teaching, I make it really clear to the students that I'm teaching that the work that you're doing here is an opportunity for you to go out in the world and keep building and challenging and shifting and changing the world that we currently live in, challenging white supremacy and patriarchy, challenging racism and homophobia and transphobia, challenging capitalism, and building a future towards abolition. That's how I use the space of academia. For me, academia and academic institutions are just one part of my toolbox in helping build the next generation of artists and organizers.
Okay, that's powerful. I like how you put that in terms of academia being kind of a vessel for that scholarship. So thank you for that. So I guess pushing that a little bit further and thinking about you as an educator, what kind of strategies would you suggest to change the climate of the classroom, and higher education academic leadership?
I have so many thoughts about this.
Okay, okay. This is something
Especially
I'm personally interested in, so I'm gonna take notes.
Yeah, it's being a student in an academic institution, especially if you're a student of color
Mhm.
at a PWI, is really challenging. And oftentimes, as a professor, and I'm pretty sure other professors feel this way, we sort of end up being more than just professors. We end up being case managers and counselors and a support system for students who are sometimes first-year college students who are trying to navigate a system that they've never been a part of, and they can't ask their parents about what they did. And so part of what I think we need to understand as educators, especially if we are interested in recruiting and bringing in students of color, Black and Black and brown students, poor students, women, queer, trans folks, that it's going to be difficult and it's going to
Yeah.
be a journey, and that our students need a lot of support.
Mhm.
And I oftentimes, I lost my earring.
It's okay.
Um,
It's the wind.
on the next question. I oftentimes feel like we put a lot on the professor,
Mm,
have to hold that space for the student.
mm,
And I sometimes wish that we would really create systems that track in the good way, not in the surveillance way,
mm.
track our students who are coming in that are going to need that extra support, and figuring out how we create a circle of support, a container of support for them.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think a sustainable system of support, that really resonates with me because, as you say, they're navigating a system they've never been a part of, and they're navigating a system that wasn't built to be inclusive, to be honest. And so, yeah. So in your opinion, so we talked a little bit in the intro, I don't know if it got cut out, but we talked about the role in the library planning this event. In your opinion, how can libraries help and participate in the social justice movement that affect our campus, students, and community?
Um, let's see. Obviously, yes. I want to start with just saying that libraries were my safe space as a young person. I grew up, for the first 16 years of my life, the internet didn't exist,
Mm,
right? So there was no Google, there was no, I'm just going to search this on the World Wide Web. It was like you go to a library and you talk to a librarian, you look up books and you sit and read them in there, and the library has reading time and programming. And so and it's free.
right.
And I didn't, the library was sort of my after school program.
Mm,
Um, and so the library system is so critical for communities of color, for working class communities, for poor communities. And the library system is also such an important place, especially I remember going to my library on my campus, when my first, few years in college, and like those beautiful libraries are not just full of books, they're these like beautiful institutions that
yes.
hold so much and carry so much. And so I definitely think, so much of the work of the library, it also lends for it to be a space for social justice movements, and can definitely support students in the community. And I think we have to, I think, especially now that the internet is so just all consuming,
I would say
you
pervasive.
know, yes, pervasive, all consuming.
Mm,
It feels like it's so important for us to have like people of multiple generations holding down the library as
mm,
like one of those places, those safe places that in some ways can, end up obsolete
mm.
if we're not careful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it makes me think of how public spaces are. It's a space that I think people take for granted. Where when we lose those, we lose a lot of our liberties and freedoms. Okay, so we'll move and shift gears a little bit to university activism, and I think we got a lot of questions pertaining to this area, specifically to students. So for our students watching this, what advice would you give to them who want to be activists but don't know where to start? What does it look like to be a student abolitionist?
I always tell folks to start with reading.
Mm,
Do your own research. Read books. There's a ton of amazing books on abolition now. Folks like Derricka Purnell, Mariam
mm,
Kaba, so many people like Ruthie Gilmore, Angela Davis. I would say read articles about
mm,
abolition. Take your time and become a student
mm.
of abolition. Even before you may call yourself an abolitionist, there's so much to learn
Yeah.
about the abolitionist movement, from the abolition of chattel slavery to now the abolition of police and prisons.
Mhm.
It's really quite a beautiful legacy. And, the current media system has really created a lot of fear around the word abolition. But it's actually, we're in good company. Harriet Tubman was an abolitionist. Who wouldn't
Yeah.
want to be Harriet Tubman, who wouldn't want to be in her legacy? And so the work of abolition and learning about it really does, it does rely on us to become students of it. I'm still a student of abolition. I'll be a student of it forever.
Mm, yeah. I'm actually going to go to that question because I think that might be a good place for us to expand on that. So you have a new book. It came out at the start of this year, and it talks about abolition work. And in the intro, which I don't know if it got cut out, but there's 12 steps to changing yourself in the world.
You
Can
got
you
it.
talk? Yes, I have it right here. Get a copy today. No, but can you talk to us about you're sort of touching on it now, but can you talk to us about the history of that work, the work of abolition, and what it means in today's context?
Of course. Abolition is a 100-year-old movement, hundreds-year-old movement that really started with the abolition of chattel slavery.
Mhm,
Of uh, uh, Many people know what chattel slavery is: the enslavement of African people to labor for many, many different types of things, whether it was cotton or tobacco. And it was an industry
mhm,
that relied on slave labor. And it was an industry that many people did not believe would ever be abolished. It was one of the single most prominent wealth bringing industries of
mhm.
this country. Many people are still benefiting from that wealth.
Yep.
Um, and many people are still not benefiting, as in Black people, from not being paid for their labor. So, there was a long history of, we got to get rid of chattel slavery. There was a moral fight against chattel slavery. There was an economic fight. This is not sustainable to have to use human beings as free labor
Mhm,
to do the work that plantation owners and then early corporations were calling for.
mhm,
But there was a sort of like a little caveat when slavery was abolished, which was the 13th Amendment,
mhm.
which folks should watch the documentary 13th by Ava
Yes,
DuVernay,
yes.
which simply states, yes, we have abolished slavery, except if you are convicted of a crime.
Mhm,
And from the very moment that slavery ends, we see the onset of Black codes. We
mhm,
see the onset of transforming what used to be plantations, like Angola prison was a plantation, into Angola prison. And we start to see the very making of a criminal legal system that relied
Mm-hmm.
on slavery.
Yeah.
So the work of ending slavery is not over, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
The work of abolition is the work of finally ending slavery, is the work of ending the role of policing and imprisonment as we know it. And that is the history of chattel slavery and the history of abolition. And, many of us probably grew up learning about abolition as sort of like nice white Quakers, ending abolition. But sure, there were always allies in the abolitionist movement, but abolition was really led by enslaved Africans. And we know some of the biggest names, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. So much of their work was about talking about the need to abolish slavery and the impact, the
Yeah.
moral impact it had on the world. Same thing with mass incarceration and police violence. This
Yeah.
is a moral crisis,
Yeah.
a moral crisis that we are dealing with. And it's time that we fully abolish the ways in which slavery still exists in this country.
Yeah. So I'm going to just keep following that line because I think we're going in a good conversational direction. But so can you talk to us a little bit about your book? So it's 12 steps to approaching abolition work. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you arrived at that framework and why these 12 steps are important and how to come into this?
Yeah, speaking of academia and scholarship, the book comes out of a Harvard Law Review article that I wrote.
Mm.
Uh, and Harvard Law Review came to me probably in I don't remember, honestly, a few years ago.
Okay.
And they asked if I would write something on abolition.
Mm.
And I said, of course. It was the first time that the Harvard Law Review was discussing abolition.
Mm.
And I was like, I knew some of the people that were writing about it, and I loved the discourse, but it was a very academic discourse.
Mm.
And I really wanted to write about abolition from the place of how do you practice? And what does practicing abolition look like on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And what I realized was that we don't talk enough about how the abolitionist practice happens, how it works, how we make mistakes, how it's not easy. And so that's where these 12 steps came out of that book. And
Mm.
that article, I put it in the link if we want to put it in the chat for others that are
Mm.
watching. And I realized that this could be a book. I mean, someone came to me and was like, "Would you be interested in writing a book about this?" And I was like, "How do I?" It takes a lot of time to write a book.
I can imagine,
Uh,
yes.
but I said yes, and I'm really grateful I did. And these 12 steps are really, this is truly a handbook. It really gives people, step by step. Just gives you steps on how to
Yeah.
practice thing, how to practice courageous conversations, building your imagination, being accountable, things like that.
Yeah, and what I appreciate about it is that it is from a very approachable standpoint. It's very immersive in terms of how you call on readers to do self-reflection. You give multiple examples for how that step is illustrated in real life. So yeah, that's a really good and approachable way to look into the work of abolition practice or abolitionist practices. So I know we're kind of nearing the end. I know we lost a little bit of time, but I feel like this has just been, I don't know, I've been really enjoying our conversation. It just went by so quickly. So I'm trying to figure out a good last question for what we should kind of end on. I think maybe I will just go back up to the student question. In talking about expanding on the advice you were giving for students for how to approach this work, what would be your advice to students looking for ways to show up to the conversation? So you said start with learning, right? Start with reading. And so once they've read and they've become scholars and lifelong learners of this, what are ways for them to move beyond that into this showing up to do the work?
It's a good question. Number one, identify what you feel most interested in. Some people are most interested in climate change. Some are interested in police violence and mass incarceration. Some folks are interested in community gardening. Some people are interested in storytelling and sharing the stories of the movement, sharing the stories of change makers. Decide what you're interested in. And then from there, I always tell people join something, join an organization. You cannot do this alone. Join a club, join something, be in community, because this work is not work you do alone. This work is what you do in community with alongside people in collectives, with institutions. It's really important that you don't feel like you are going to be alone in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for what it is that we were able to talk about today, the wisdom, the experience, the lived experience, the insights. I know that for me, I've left just feeling again that there's so much to learn, so much to do. And so again, thank you so much for being in this space with us today. Oh, I'm being told we have one more. We can ask one more question. Or maybe, do you want to? I know we've kind of talked about a lot of things. Is there something you want to speak on that's on your heart that you want to share in this space?
Yeah, in the spirit of community gardens, I would love to just share that today. The reason why I'm in a very sterile environment, I work alongside a few other folks at an art gallery and community center in Inglewood, California. And today, this is, the first permanent community garden that we installed at a housing village that houses 232 people who are in transition, finding permanent housing. And the actual community garden is in a geometric dome. It's a vertical garden, and it's called an abolitionist pod.
Okay.
Folks can look it up. It's super beautiful. It's so amazing. And I just want to name that I probably wouldn't have thought of doing this kind of gardening without the work and the experience I had early on going to Detroit. So I just felt like that was a really beautiful
Thank you.
full circle moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love gardening, and I realize also we have the same type of necklace on. So,
Oh.
all right, well, great. So, I want to again say thank you so much for the time that you spent with us this afternoon. I hope that those in the audience, have left with something new that they can enact in whatever work they do in the world. So, so I think with that, I'm ending it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this was amazing. And thank you, Wayne State community and everybody who showed up today.
Yes.
Appreciate y'all. Y'all are amazing. Keep doing powerful work. If you're in Detroit, don't get blown away by the wind.
I know. Did you hear any of it?
No.
Okay, good.
I heard y'all talking about it. And if you're in the other part of the country, be well today and enjoy the day.
Yes, thank you.